testing with this exciting webinar on a new approach to testing packaging. And I'm joined today by Tom Ewing, who also works in BrainJuicer Labs, who is going to be taking your questions at the end of the webinar, and we're going to have a bit of a Q&A session at the end of the session. So if you have any questions as we go, do please type them in the box on the right of your screen, and Tom will read them out and put them to me at the end of the session. Just a point of housekeeping, this webinar, the link to it, so the video link and the audio will be made available at the end of the day, so you'll be able to link to it and rewatch it if you want to. And also, if you did want to have a copy of the presentation itself, do please feel free to get in touch either with me directly or Tom, and we will gladly send it over to you. So there we are. All that said, let's make a start. So what I'm going to be talking to you today is a new approach to packaging testing that's really rooted in behavioural economics and the way that we make decisions. And anyone who has listened to me speak before or to BrainJuicer webinars will probably have been made aware and be familiar with the terms System 1 and System 2 thinking. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today, because it really is at the heart of this new approach to packaging. And System 1 and System 2 are terms that have been used by the grandfather of behavioural economics, who's known as Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, preeminent psychologist. And to paraphrase him really crudely, he says that we think much less than we think we think. So we love to believe that the decisions that we make are evaluative, analytical, rational, and taken carefully and deliberatively. But actually, many of the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis and the judgments we make are made not like that at all, but are made instead very quickly, very intuitively, and emotionally, by what's known as System 1 decision-making. And that's different from the sort of evaluative, deliberative way of making decisions that we describe as System 2 decision-making. And the thing about System 1 decision-making is that it's really quick and it's really easy to make decisions in this way. So if you think about it in terms of processing power, System 1, which is this quick way of making decisions, is 11 million bits per second in terms of its processing power, as opposed to System 2, which is sort of a puny, old-fashioned computer at 50 bits per second by comparison. And over time and over the years and through experience, we learn very slowly through System 1 how to make decisions quickly. So when you learn to drive, at first it's very difficult. You're taught various rules, and through System 2 you kind of get to know how to learn to drive. But over time and experience, we learn how to do things without thinking so much. It becomes automatic, and that's what System 1 is all about. So it comes to a point, 10 years after you've learned to drive, many years later, where you drive to work and you've forgotten everything that went on in that journey because you were doing it on autopilot. It became automatic, if you like. And System 1 is therefore at the heart of everything that we do, where we stand in relation to the toaster in the morning and how we get to work in the morning. It's all based on automatic, quick, intuitive judgment, or largely anyway. And so we have these two systems, System 1 and System 2. System 2 is slow, it's rule-based, it's logical, it's a bit tiring actually. We don't like thinking hard, and we don't like employing System 2 if we can possibly avoid it. And it's quite considered. System 1, on the other hand, is this fast and intuitive, quick way of doing things based on experience and guided by our emotions. It's automatic, a kind of automatic way of thinking. Now the thing is that marketing, advertising, communications of all sorts, including packaging, and market research actually, is quite firmly rooted in the idea that we influence people through System 2 decision making. So the idea is that, you know, we will put a message to people that will persuade them of a brand's benefits, and they will compute this and analyze it and come to the decision that this is, yes, a good idea, and it's evaluated in that way. Now, in fact, that's not how many of our decisions are made, and to do that is really very difficult, because it means influencing that puny little system to computer, and doing so with a sort of iron fist. And the rule and the kind of the role for emotion in that model and way of thinking about decision making, the role of emotion is limited really to this velvet glove wrapped around an iron fist of a message. It's like a sweetening sugar coating around the bitter pill of a message. And in fact, what we're learning from psychology and behavioral economics is that many of our decisions are actually made through system 1 judgment. And the way to influence people is therefore through emotion, through their heart. And if you can move people a little bit closer to your brand and the way that they like, in a sense, they like your brand, they're likely to make a quick, effortless, and automatic decision in your favor, a system 1 decision in your favor. Because the thing that emotion does is that it simplifies and guides decision making, even and particularly even in difficult and complex categories. So if you've got an array of choices in front of you, what Kahneman says is that instead of asking ourselves the difficult question, which is what do I think about this set of options and choices, we ask ourselves an easier question to answer, which is what do I feel about this, and we go with the one that we like. So this quick, automatic and emotional way of making decisions helps to explain why it is that the brands that I'm showing you now on this page, even though there are no brand names mentioned, will be familiar to you. And in fact, you'll probably be able to tell what these brands are. There are 4 brands there. Some are more international than others, but I think you'll probably be able to guess what they are. I'll put you out of your misery in a minute. So what these brands, what this branding does, and what branding does generally, is that it helps you to make quick decisions. You don't have to read the clues that we've got here on the cards. What you're able to do is from the shape and the color and the font size and the general patterns that are put in front of you, you'll be able to discern in many cases what these brands are without actually there being a brand name on there. So to put you out of your misery, top left we've got Absolute Vodka, top right we've got Penguin Books, bottom left we have Starbucks, of course, Little Mermaid, and bottom right we have Ferrari, a horse rears. So this is a way of thinking about branding that is really rooted in System 1 and our ability to recognize patterns and associations through that. So when thinking about this kind of this System 1 way of making decisions and recognizing things, it's important to think in this way because it can lead brands into a bit of trouble. And what happened a few years ago, many of you will be familiar with this, is that Tropicana replaced its packaging. And here you can see on the left of the page what the old packaging looked like, the Tropicana pack with the orange and the straw stuck into it, and the new pack that was intended to replace it, and in fact it did replace it for a short while. Now what happened next is well known, but for a period of about 6 weeks the new pack replaced the old one, but there were problems because unit sales dropped by as much as 20%, and Tropicana was forced to replace the pack with the original pack. And Neil Campbell, who was president of Tropicana, was quoted as saying that we underestimated the deep emotional bond they had with the original packaging. So that was part of the answer for the problem, but the other part of the puzzle as to why this had performed so badly was that all the branding, all the associations that have been built up in people's minds over the years had been taken away from them. So the straw, the orange, the basic shapes and patterns, a bit like in the last page that I showed you with the 4 brands with no brand name, all of that had been really almost completely removed from the new packaging. There were things about the new packaging that were similar, but the basic patterns and shapes had gone. So on a System 1 level, it was very difficult to make that quick and automatic judgment in the way that people had done with the old pack. But as well as that, what we see with the new pack is an introduction of more messaging. So 100% orange, pure and natural, not from concentrate, is dialed up. You've got it at the bottom as well, 100% pure and natural orange juice, pasteurized. And you've got it at the top, squeezed from fresh oranges, pulp-free, and pulp-free at the top as well. So we've got quite a lot going on, and Tropicana has been moved over to the right and turned on its side. So it's making it very difficult for people to make a quick and easy decision to buy this product without them having to think very hard to process this information using System 2, and therefore all that slows them down and they're inclined to switch to another brand. And that sort of emphasis on messaging and conveying information on the front of pack can be something of a problem. And what I wanted to do is to illustrate that with something that isn't packaging at all, but that is website design, because it's a really interesting case study that will help us talk about packaging as we move forward. So this was Alta Vista. I don't know if you remember Alta Vista. But this is what it looked like back in 1999, the onset of the outset of the dot-com bubble. And what we can see here is that there are all sorts of search options available to you. So you've got 4 search options with buttons there for you to choose from: web pages, images, video, audio. You've got all sorts of options underneath in terms of channels and access and useful tools. You've got a directory bottom left. You've got Alta Vista highlights, power search, so big changes coming to Alta Vista. Bottom right, you've got specific searches about Halloween images and various other things. And then top right, you've got advanced text search and another link to image search. The net effect of all of these things on one page is really rather confusing and a bit difficult. It makes it very System 2. You have to employ your System 2 to work out what's going on and what your course of action is likely to be. And then, of course, someone else came along, Google. And Google did something really quite radically different. It provided you with one box, one simple box to enter your search in. Very System 1. Didn't force people to think very much, made it very clear what they had to do. And of course the rest is history really. But Alta Vista does still exist, for those of you who are wondering, and this is what it looks like roughly today. So very much like the Google approach, where everything's been simplified and made easier for people. And so this was something that one of our clients came to us with, a very parallel study, really, parallel case study, where they had a competitor who they believed had very intuitive and emotional packaging that helped quick decision making. So a bit like the Google version of in the case study I've just shared with you. And their packaging, by their own admission, they thought was very information-based, quite message-heavy, a lot going on, a bit like the Alta Vista page I showed you. It was the Alta Vista relative to their competitors, Google. And their worry was that actually it was making people think too much in that decision, in that moment of decision-making in the store. It was an FMCG product, and that when faced with brand A and brand B, people go for the easy one. the emotional one and the easy one, that helps quick decision making, that's designed for quick decision making, whereas their brand, by their own admission, they felt was making people think a bit too hard and a bit too long, and we don't like thinking hard, we don't like using System 2, and we defer to System 1 and Brand A. So we did a couple of things to test this hypothesis. First thing we did was ask people how they felt about the two brands via the packaging. So we showed the two equivalent packs, and we asked people how they felt. And this was using our face trace approach, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, but it's based on the work of a psychologist, Paul Ekman, and it uses faces to get at a System 1 instinctive emotional response rather than asking people to think too much about how they feel. And so what we found was it's true that Brand A was indeed more emotional than Brand B. And remember what Kahneman said, that if you are confronted with a complex array of choices, you don't ask yourself what you think about this selection, but you ask yourself instead, how do I feel? So if you feel good about a brand, you're more likely to choose it and more likely to pick it quickly and effortlessly off the shelf without giving too much thought to it. So part A of the hypothesis had been proved. It was definitely more emotional. But was it easier and more intuitive? Well, we also did something else. We conducted a central location test with a fixture with all the products from the category on it, and we asked people to stock up as they normally would on the brands that were available. And what we found was that in these fairly traditional conditions, Brand B, the client's brand, was favoured. People had all the time in the world to read the information that was on the packs and to make a careful and considered System 2 decision. But that didn't really reflect what was going on in the marketplace. So as well as that, we conducted the same exercise again, but this time we put people under time pressure. Because when you put people under time pressure, they're likely to make a quick and intuitive and instinctive System 1 decision rather than a System 2 decision. And this, after all, reflects what's going on in every supermarket around the world. There are so many products available in any given supermarket that we can't possibly process every decision in a System 2 fashion. And many, many, many of the decisions we make, the majority of the decisions we make in a supermarket, are based on this automatic System 1 decision making. So we've replicated here, if you like, in this experiment, the context of a supermarket by putting people under a time pressure. When they're distracted, and when people are distracted and in a rush, they're more likely to use System 1 thinking. And this reflected what the actual market share for these two brands was rather well, and much better than the traditional route. And these two brands are fairly evenly matched on distribution and all those sorts of things. So, this was a really good predictor for what was going on in the real world, and much better than untimed conditions. But that was rather unwieldy to do on a large scale. It was expensive, difficult to implement, and so why not try and see if we couldn't replicate that online? And that's what we did. What we did was set up another experiment with the same two brands, and we looked at giving people the same experience online. So we put them under time pressure. We even experimented with distraction, because if your System 2 is distracted by something else, then you're more likely to make a System 1 judgment on the choice from shelf exercise that we're doing. And what we found was that we were able to replicate this result. So online, on the far left here, you've got people under no time pressure or distraction, so free to make up their mind in all time in the world. And we find that Brand B is favoured over Brand A, not reflecting market share. Under time pressure, it switches around the other way, as we saw on, in our offline test. Distraction also has the same effect. And when we were really mean to some people, we put them under time pressure and we distracted them. And that provided a really good stress test for packaging, for System 1 packaging. Brand A winning out quite clearly there in that example. So what we are doing in our new pack test is putting people under time pressure, replicating that in market, in sort of in the supermarket experience. So this is our new System 1 pack test. The main questions are, we ask people to make a choice from shelf under time pressure. They've got 5 seconds to look at the shelf to make a decision, and then 3 further seconds to choose the pack that they are going to buy. We then ask recognition, so we flash up the pack for the brand of interest very quickly, so just a second, and then they have to tell us what they saw. And this is to get at the part of the problem that was seen for Tropicana, that obviously wasn't highlighted by the research that they did, that recognition was reduced. And then emotional pull, so how moving, how emotional is your packaging, and that is our face trace measure, as I mentioned before. How do you feel about this product? So once we've done that, we've got a measure which is really about understanding how the brand is moving forwards in terms of perceptions and attitudinal perceptions, and we call this our implicit characteristics test. And what we do here is we put people again under time pressure and ask them to make a quick decision as to whether certain statements like, I don't know, comforting, warm, indulgent, apply to the pack that we're showing them on the left. And it measures 2 things. First of all, how many people say yes, that they do associate that attribute with the pack, but also it looks at how quickly they associate it with the pack. Because the quicker people associate with the pack, the more certain it is that that they really do associate those 2 things rather closely. In addition to those key measures, we look at something called visual magnetism. Now this is rather new, and it's been developed by academics in Denmark, and the company is called I2D2. And what they've done, really quite brilliantly, is look at eye tracking, results from eye tracking, and they have created an algorithm that mimics eye tracking and the results from eye tracking in the first second of people looking at the pack. So we don't actually do any eye tracking, but it is an algorithm that mimics what people would look at if you had shown this pack to people. Now that's quite interesting, an idea, and what it does is enables you to get a sense of, at a glance, on a System 1 level, at a glance, what people would look at in that first second, but it also allows you to do iterative design work. So if in the run-up to the test you're keen to understand questions around brand hierarchy and where things sit on the pack, and you're testing new designs, you can try to optimize where eyes would fall at a quick glance on the pack before you put the packaging into the pack test. So visual magnetism. So what I want to do is just take you through some examples and show you what it feels like. And the first thing we're going to do is look at choice from shelf. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to show you a pack, well, not a pack, a kind of shelf shot with lots of packs on it for margarines and butters, and you're going to have 5 seconds to look at this shelf display and to make a decision as to what you're going to buy. Okay, are you ready? So 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what did you decide? What did you go for? Well, if you're anything like the respondents that we tried this on, what we found was really quite interesting in that Clover, the Clover brand, was chosen really by quite a high proportion of people under time pressure. And Flora wasn't chosen so much by people. This is on the right here. You can see the 5 variants for Flora and 2 for Clover. And this is really quite interesting because Clover's rate of sale is very high, and it performs very well relative to the amount of distribution it gets compared with flora. Now, when we did this and put people not under time pressure, so they had all the time in the to make their decision, this is the result. Clover not performing as flora. Now, why is this? Well, let's have a closer look at the packs. So when you look at the Clover pack, you've got a very clear brand name in green on the yellow, and you have a nice clover symbol that helps you at a glance to see what's going on. Flora, on the other hand, has all sorts of different treatments of the brand. So the brand looks different in almost every pack, in a different place, a different size. Not only that, but there's all sorts of information on the packs which make it difficult at a glance to be able to pick up the pack in a rush that you might be looking for. So there's something inconsistent about the packaging for flora that makes life hard. It makes people think a little bit too hard. And one of the things that System 1 craves is order, consistency, and coherence, which Clover has in spades, actually. So aim for coherence and consistency in your packaging because it really helps in rushed System 1 conditions. Here's another example. This is for barbecue sauces this time. On the left you can see the shelf display, and what I'd like to focus on is the HP bottles, the single bottle on the top shelf and the bigger bottles on the bottom shelf. And what we found here was really quite interesting in that the small bottle improved under System 1 conditions and the bigger bottles deteriorated in System 1 conditions, so 10% fewer people choosing them. Now, why is that? Well, the HP bottle that's top right here features the Houses of Parliament logo. It has, and HP stands for House of Parliament for those of you overseas who aren't familiar with the brand. It is very, very similar to the original HP sauce bottle, so the non-barbecue original variant. Very quick and very familiar to people to make that decision. The bottle shape, the bottle design, the larger HP letters relative to the letters on the bottom, the bottles on the lower shelf, all make it very familiar and very instinctive for people to reach for it relative to the ones on the bottom shelf. On the bottom shelf, the packs are a little bit, again, like this sort of Alta Vista example I gave you. There's an awful lot going on. It's very difficult for people to make a quick decision as to what it is they're going to go for, and it just makes it a little bit harder for people to do things quickly. And what we want to be able to do is to create a range of packs where you can quickly and intuitively and easily, through System 1, pick the one that you need and you want. So this example and the Flora example a little bit both feel a little bit like the Alta Vista pack, relative to the simpler Google pack, if you like. Final shelf test example, and this one is for ambient juice drinks. And what we found here was, notice for Ocean Spray, which is in the middle of the shelf this time, that you've got a very consistent treatment of the brand across the packs and very easy sort of color coding as to what it is that you might want from that range. And under System 1 conditions, sure enough, this improves a little bit. And for Five Alive on the bottom shelf, which only gets a very small proportion of people choosing it, under System 1 conditions, this goes down a little bit further. Now, these are only small changes, but I do think it's interesting, the Five Alive example, because when you think back to what Five Alive used to look like, and I remember this in the 1980s, this is what the pack was 20, 30 years ago, and how it looked then. It was then changed some years later, and the new pack held on to a lot of the cues from the previous pack, so the greens and then the fruit across the bottom, and the words spelled out Five Alive across the pack. So it still retains some of the cues of the original pack. The new packs, which were relaunched, part of a big relaunch a couple of years ago, are lovely, beautiful, clear, refreshing in many ways, but they don't retain any of the kind of equity that was built up in people's minds, in people's neural networks and associations over the many years that preceded the relaunch. And so it's almost as if a new brand has been launched, and that was, that may well have been the intention. But what it means is that it's very difficult. People have got nothing to hang on to when making a quick and automatic decision. If they want the 5 alive, it's not instinctive to choose this new pack. And you'll notice that the 5 is now spelt out in a number rather than in words and letters, making it even more difficult to link the new kind of brand, if you like, with the previous one. And so this reminds me a little bit of the Tropicana example. And the Tropicana brand, of course, is a very big brand, and it's very difficult to make changes to big brands where you don't have some sort of, I suppose, association with what went on before. It could well be that with a smaller brand you've got, it may well be that you need to do something really quite radical with your packaging, and that's the thinking here. So in addition to choice from shelf, we also want to know how emotional packs are. And so what we've got here is our emotional pull measure, and it ranges from, it categorizes packs from ones that are really quite hard work and not very emotional, through to those that are almost mesmerizing in their ability to sort of transfix you emotionally. And so on the right here, at the top of the 4-star bracket, we've got the Felix pack. And if you look at this pack, it really is quite emotional. It's anthropomorphized, so the cat looks like a human. It's big black pupils, it's big black eyes on the human plate. There's a lovely coherence and consistency about the colors and the packaging and the way they're used and the paw prints throughout the pack. And it's very engaging. And coupled with very engaging advertising that's won awards over many years, the character comes through on the pack. The cat Felix character is conveyed by the packaging and used by the packaging and reinforces the emotional advertising that's developed over the years. And then we have Whiskers, which is also quite a strong pack, a 3-star pack, but not quite as strong. The cat is looking a bit nonchalant, looking away from you, and less engaging generally than the Felix pack on the right-hand side. So emotional pull is helpful because it helps to determine whether you're going to have a quick System 1 advantage at the shelf, because what we like is a good shortcut to what we'll choose. And here are some other packs. So Rouse Honey, and also a 4-star pack. We tested that a number of years ago, and it's doing very well in the marketplace. And further down in a 2-star category, we've got an example there from Aunt Bessie's. So that takes me on to implicit testing and implicit characteristic testing. And I outlined briefly what this was before, but what we get people to do is to allocate a key on their keyboard as to whether it's a yes or a no. Yes being that you associate the statement that we're about to show you with the packaging shown on the left. And so people can answer very quickly just by pressing a key, yes or no, to every statement that we show. So there's a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we show the first statement. So it might look a bit like this, comforting. And then people say yes or no, and it's not just the yes, but it's the speed with which they say yes that gives us a kind of System 1 degree of certainty, if you like, as to whether that's associated with the pack or not. System 1 doesn't do doubt, it's kind of yes or no. And looking at time is a great, timing people is a great way of understanding how strongly associated this attribute is or not. Because sometimes, and this is the whole point of implicit testing, we're unable or unwilling to say whether something is truly associated with something or not. And that's the origins of implicit testing. If people take longer than their allotted kind of 6 seconds to answer, then we say, sorry, too slow, you'll need to be quicker next time, and we don't count their answers. So this is the kind of result that you get. On the left, we've got traditional attributes on a 1 to 5 scale, and you can see here in this example how the current pack really sort of performs better than the new pack on the traditional attributes. So the new pack's struggling to perform as well as the current pack on things like comforting, warm, easy, everyday, healthy, pretty. And that's one of the criticisms of traditional pack testing, actually, is that it's really difficult for the new pack to get anywhere close to the current pack on these these or any other measures because of the sort of familiarity effect that you get in testing. And on the right-hand side, you've got our implicit measure, our implicit characteristics measure, and this is sort of System 1 agreement, we're calling it. So you've got here the same two packs, but this time we are looking at the percentage of people who agree with the attribute, but also we give it a slight uplift, a slight weight, incremental weight for those people who answer really quickly, so for speed of response. And from this you're able to see that the new pack does better on fun, indulgent, natural, healthy, and pretty. And the pack, can't show you the pack unfortunately, but the pack that we tested here was designed to do all those sorts of things. There was a lovely sun picture on it, naturalness cues that weren't so prevalent on the weren't so prominent on the current pack, and it really sort of shifted the dial and moved it forward on this new approach, unlike the old traditional approach. So finally, just a word on visual magnetism. So this is, I think, really particularly interesting when you want to look at brand hierarchy, where you're positioning things on the pack, if you want to change the positioning of your brand or various other things on the pack. And what you can see here is an example for Mattison's refrigerators, and we ran these two packs through the I2D2 approach. And what I2D2 does is that it's an algorithm that uses color and complexity and contrast to mimic the results that you'd get in eye tracking. But it can be done in about a minute or 2 minutes, just uploaded and then immediately downloaded, unlike eye tracking, which takes a long time to do, and it tells you what's happening in just that first glance, that first second. And it's great because it can be used iteratively in the run-up to testing, to fine-tune your packaging before you put it into testing. So you have current and new, and we've got Mattison's who were keen to dial up the Mattison's brand. So you can see it on the left. It's very small and within the ring, the refrigerator's ring. And on the right, you can see how it's much bigger and across the top of the pack. And lo and behold, what does the visual magnetism tell us? It tells us that it's hardly glanced at all in the first second for current, but for new, it gets a very bright red and orange sort of heat magnetism picture overlaid on the Mattison's brand and the refrigerator's brand. So what did we find from our recognition test? This is where we flash up the pack for a second and ask people what they saw. Well, we found a result that was very much in line, actually, with the visual magnetism, and that for the new pack, mentions of Mattison's and refrigerators were much higher than they were for the current pack, where it was hidden in the center of the ring and where the visual magnetism was very low. So very helpful when you're thinking about changing the position of brands and various other things on the pack. So that is it. That is BrainJuicer's System 1 pack test, choice from shelf, recognition, emotional pull, implicit characteristics, and, if it's helpful, if you'd like it, visual magnetism. And I think what the whole approach seeks to do is to ensure that your packaging is really fun, fast, and easy to pick off the shelf. That you're creating packaging and packaging design that makes it easy for people to choose your brand, that makes it automatic, that makes it intuitive and instinctive. And so this approach can be used for pack relaunches, of course, so when you've got a change to your current packaging, current branding, but also can be used just to understand how your category is working. Which are the brands which are System 1? Is your brand System 1 in its design? Do you need to do something about your current design? How can we help to make it more System 1? So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I hope you found it interesting. And I think we've got time now for some questions. So hopefully Tom is well prepped with all the things that you've been typing. So Tom, over to you. Do you have anything coming through?
We certainly do. There have been a bunch of questions.
Oh, good.
So we'll go straight into them. We'll kick off with this. Perhaps kind of a slightly technical question, so I'll try to explain it, which is it's a behavioural economics question. It's whether we tested the System 1 decision under ego depletion and or cognitive load. Now my understanding is that we tested this under cognitive load, which is basically the sort of level of stuff you're having to think about, so pressure and distraction will add to the cognitive load. But ego depletion, which is kind of the finding whereby if you've had to use your willpower or if you had to make decisions, then your future decisions, you're more likely to kind of revert to the default or lose your self-control.
Yes,
so do we have any
yes.
kind of, yeah.
I think it's we would describe it as cognitive. I think we'd probably call it as cognitive load rather than ego depletion. And there's a lovely, for anyone who's interested in the ego depletion idea, what it means is there's a lovely example from academic literature where you gave people a choice between a fruit salad and a piece of chocolate cake. And what they got people to do was to memorize a short number, like 63, and to make the decision. And what was found was that people went for the fruit salad because System 2 is a way of controlling people's behavior, and you go for the healthy option. And it's not really distracted by this very easy task, this 63 number. What they also did was give people a long number to remember, which is really distracting System 2 and making it very difficult for people to remember, to think about anything else other than the long number. And in that situation, people went, amazingly, it reversed the decision. It made people go for the chocolate cake because they weren't able to I suppose, assert the self-control to stop them from going from the chocolate cake. So in our distraction test, when we experimented with that, what we did was we got people to listen out for a sort of in-store announcement that may or may not apply to them whilst they were making the decision. So we were trying to recreate cognitive load and to ensure that people made a System 1 choice. And it seemed to work.
Great.
But we're not using the distraction, it's just the time pressure that we're using in our test.
Fantastic. So next question, speaking of that time pressure, we have a question who's heard stats of like it only takes kind of 3 seconds in some stats to make a decision. Are we leaving it too long? Are we
leaving it too long? Well, it's a good question. I think we are doing. I think by putting people under time pressure at all to make the decision, we are engineering and creating very different results. And I think 5 seconds is enough time, just about the right sort of time to get people to do that. And when we've looked at how people take normally to make this kind of decision, it's more like sort of 11 or 12 in an online test. So we're sort of more than halving the amount of time that people generally feel comfortable with, which is what we essentially did with our offline test. Is we looked at the time that it took people to make the decision normally, and we sort of reduced that by more than a half, so that people really feel the pressure. And in some cases, I think it's more actually how pressured do you feel than the absolute time that's involved. Knowing you've got to do something quickly is, it does put you under that sort of duress.
Okay, next thing, I'm gonna start putting you under duress actually, because we're getting so many questions.
Oh,
so
dear,
we're gonna try to put Orlando under some time pressure now and go for the quick answers.
Go for it, Tom.
Some of these questions actually I can kind of step in and think, but here's one that always comes up, which is, do you think we would see the same result for Flora if the packs were all on one shelf side by side? We've had quite a few questions about kind of pack position on the shelf, randomizing whether people are just going for the middle ones and such like. Orlando.
What we find is that when you put people under time pressure, that there is a slight advantage to being on the very top shelf, and that is mimicking the more than slight advantage that you get in the real world for being on the top shelf. So when you're on the top shelf, it's the position that everyone sort of really wants to be in, and they don't really want to be at the bottom by people's feet. What we're doing by putting people under time pressure is not only recreating the context that people make decisions in the supermarket, but we're also creating a condition which is more aligned to the real supermarket experience. And so that's what we recommend when creating the shelf displays, is that we try to replicate the fixture in the store, in the main store, as closely as possible.
Okay, does this kind of testing work with large portfolios? So what if you've got a brand like Flora which has a load of variants? How do you account for that kind of?
Yes, it does. In fact, our original test that I shared with you early on in the webinar, it was brands with huge ranges of products. And I think it's really actually very helpful in those cases too, because it helps to understand which parts of the range are being chosen and are working better than others, and to provide guidance on how to make the whole range more navigable and more System 1.
And do these tests suggest that you shouldn't make radical changes to packaging for reappraisal? Are we basically saying that big changes to packaging are a no-no?
I think what we're saying is that you need to dial up things that people associate with the brand already, to make good use of the equity that you've built up over the years. You can make radical changes, but they need to be built on, I suppose, what's gone before to some extent. If you make sweeping changes to the pack, then it's as if you're relaunching the pack in the context of the store. I mean, it's as if you're launching a new pack, a new brand almost, in the context of the store. And you'd need to accompany it with an awful lot of advertising to try and build those neural networks again that that have been lost essentially with the change of pack. Particularly, sometimes with small brands, it may be sort of do or die, and you really have to go with it if that brand is in the doldrums, and perfectly understandable that you might want to change radically your pack then. But when you've got a big brand like Tropicana, in that case study we opened with, do tread carefully and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay, we've got a question about we've got a couple of them. I'm going to bunch them together, so sorry if people are asking slightly kind of subtly different things about brand loyalty and memory. Are we taking into account the kind of brand loyalty? Are we trying to factor in or out the sort of like memory effect of people reaching for their usual brand and such like?
And that's kind of built into the test really, because we will have a sample of category buyers, but also we will have a separate boost of people who are brand buyers, to see what effects there are for that particular group. So it's kind of built into the test. And of course, when you're a brand buyer, your decision is likely to be all the more automatic. And if you make radical changes to the pack and pull the kind of rug from under people and don't leave them anything to attach to, you know, a bit like the Tropicana case, then, you know, you're likely to find yourself in a bit of trouble. So it's certainly something that we'd look at.
Okay, that's great. I'll give you a clue, Orlando, as to the next question, and while you're thinking about it, I can answer a couple of the sort of technical things that are coming up.
Right.
We've got a bunch of questions about non-FMCG decision-making contexts and what the role of pack and kind of packaging and design, I guess, is in some of these non-FMCG contexts.
Absolutely.
So, for example, buying a mobile phone. Someone talks about getting a puppy for the first time, which I suspect packaging. I hope packaging is the big deal in that. But,
gosh, yes.
Meanwhile, while you think about that, Orlando, we've got a couple of very quick ones that I can answer. Did you try swapping the letters on the keyboard for yes or no, and was there any difference? We actually let people define their own letters on those kind of implicit tests, so they're using the letters that they're comfortable with, so they've got used to those letters before the actual testing starts. So no, that wouldn't make any difference. And how does the implicit algorithm method work? How does the I2D2 algorithm method work? On what measures do we base the heat map? That's I2D2 is a product we license. It's developed by a team in Denmark, and they have validated it against a very extensive database of real eye tracking tests. So they've created a model in the same way that you'd model sort of on any large data set, you would build a predictive model from it. They've built a predictive model based on that, and they're continually validating. So those are a couple of technical things. Now, Orlando, back to you to answer the question about
my words of wisdom, Tom. Yes.
Considered decisions. You've had time to consider.
I think it absolutely can be applied to categories outside FMCG. I mean, when you think about how people make decisions in a bar environment, for instance. So if you're standing at a bar, you've got people behind you, and you need to make a quick decision about what you're going to order, you're under time pressure. So it can be used for any kind of sort of bar environment or fast food outlet. It could be, I think, you know, basically what the approach does is that it generates, the framework that it's based on ensures that you create fun, fast, and easy packaging. There's a really lovely, talking about mobile phones, there's a really lovely video on YouTube. If you search for Microsoft redesigns iPod pack, of how, and I think it was created actually by Microsoft designers for internal use. But they take an iPod pack, which is beautiful, simple, very easy to understand what it is at a glance, and they redesign it with hundreds of bullet points, all sorts of product information that really you just don't need to know. And it's a really lovely journey from a System 1 pack to the ultimate System 2 pack. So if you haven't seen it, have a look for it on YouTube. But yes, absolutely applies to mobile phones. It's just packaging best practice to not overwhelm people with details of the product's benefits, and to perhaps save those for back of pack or tuck them out the way to make that decision A, desirable, and B, easy for people.
I think it's probably also worth mentioning that there's certain decisions that we like to think are more considered, and that we would hope are more considered, but they may well not be. There may be a lot of kind of rationalization and backing up the decision and such like, and so the whole process takes quite a long time. But actually that moment of decision might very well be quite impulsive rather than considered. I think it's always worth kind of, System 1 and System 2, there aren't sort of some decisions that go into the System 1 bucket, some that go into the System 2. The two systems always work together, and System 1 is very, very strong.
I think every category and sector is guided by System 1 decision making. The difference between categories is the extent to which System 2 post-rationalizes it. I think that's a nice way of putting it.
Great. I'm just here's another good one. We've still got a couple of questions to ask. I think this is probably the most questions we've ever had on a webinar. So thank you all so much for asking them. I'm going to try to run 2 or 3 more by Orlando. I know that time is kind of we're approaching the end now. Do you find that different colours evoke different emotional responses? Are there some colours that you should avoid? Are there some that do better than others?
That's a very good question, and there's certainly been a lot of work that been done to suggest that red is an approach colour, and blue is a more calming colour. If you get in touch with me directly, I can send you a paper actually that's been written on this that sort of points to this, points to sort of evidence for what colours do and how they interact with emotional response. So it's a good question, and I think only with years of testing are we going to get to the sort of answer in commercial terms with packaging.
Okay, we've had another. As soon as you said that, we got another request for the paper on colour. Can we send at least a link to a summary with the informational email?
Yes,
I know that,
absolutely.
Our marketing team are listening. So Becky,
yes.
If you're listening to that bit, the paper on colour will give you details to send
we'll dig that out. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a good question here about a link between packaging and communications. If you're doing a complete relaunch, kind of would a way to kind of lead people into System 1 be an in-store navigation and a communications launch as well? Would that kind of help the complete packaging overhaul?
Yes, I think
get to System 1 faster.
Absolutely. I think anything that can help build those neural automatic associative networks quickly and through multiple touch points is going to work well. I mean, I think what Felix does very well is that it has the same playful cat character in its advertising, and that's reinforced on its website, and it's reinforced through the packaging. And so every time you see the cat, you know instinctively and quickly that this is the Felix brand. And I think that's something that's carried through across all channels, and it helped to reinforce and to keep that association present and strong.
And we have another kind of in-store context question about how pack testing generally ignores the shelf-ready packaging context, which is the kind of boxes that the individual units come in, so you can kind of still see the box that they're in. Could we test that as well? Is that something that we kind of?
Yes, we could. In fact, we've done that as one of the tests I was showing you. Included some boxes with the packs inside it. So yes, sort of exactly, we have done that.
And we're now into our last minute. So there's one last question. This is one of my favourite questions that we got, and it's about the two lovely cats on the on those Felix and Whiskers packages. Have we got any learning on how important direct eye contact is for System 1? So if the eye is looking at you, does that create a better emotional pull?
Yes, I think it does. And I'm speaking simply from the things that I've observed and witnessed in testing over the years. That direct eye contact and faces generally, actually, faces are extremely good at evoking emotional response. We've done work that shows that in more in advertising, but that faces on print ads certainly evoke greater levels of emotion than no faces, and in direct contact, I think does. Yes, there's a lovely experiment, isn't there, Tom, about honesty boxes and milk donations to honesty boxes with eyes.
Eyes, yes.
Had the eyes versus flowers in alternate weeks, and contributions were much higher when the eyes were put up next to the honesty box relative to the flowers. And I think direct eye contact was responsible for that.
It's a kind of Mona Lisa effect. Okay, it's we've come to the end of our time. There are, I think, still a couple more questions. So what we will do is we will comb through them, and any that weren't answered, we'll make sure get answered, and we'll also make sure that colour paper that so many people have been asking about gets kind of sent out. Thank you so much for all your questions. As I say, a record-breaking haul of questions that's definitely kept us on our toes. I hope we didn't end up answering them so fast that the message didn't get over. Thank you, Orlando, so much for putting that webinar together.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Fascinating, yeah. And keep keep your eyes open for the next BrainJuicer webinar. Thank you so much, and if there's any other information or questions or requests you have around what you've heard today, please do get in touch with Orlando or me or your usual BrainJuicer contact about it. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And goodbye.
Bye-bye.